The gun was too heavy for Tommy Collins's hands. He could feel it, the weight of stolen metal dragging his 12-year-old arms down, the sweat making his palms slick against the grip, the tremor in his fingers that he couldn't stop no matter how hard he tried. But he didn't lower it. Couldn't. Because the moment he did, he'd be dead. Or worse, he'd go back. The Crimson Anchor smelled like cigar smoke, leather, and blood that had soaked into the floorboards decades ago. Every man in the bar wore the same expression: predatory patience. They leaned against walls, sat at tables with half-empty whiskey glasses, hands hovering near concealed weapons, waiting for the boss's signal. Alfie Kane sat in the back booth like a king on a throne made of violence. He didn't need to move, didn't need to shout. His presence alone commanded the room. Broad shoulders draped in a black silk shirt, neck tattoos crawling up from his collar like dark vines, gold chain catching the amber light. His eyes, though. Those were what made Tommy's breath catch. Not angry, not amused, just watching, calculating. Like Tommy was a puzzle Alfie had all the time in the world to solve. "You work for me now." Tommy's voice cracked on the last word. He hated that. Hated the way it made him sound like a scared kid instead of someone to be taken seriously. But he kept the gun steady, or as steady as he could manage while his entire body shook like he'd been thrown into a freezer. "Hello, everyone watching. I hope you're doing amazing today, wherever you're tuning in from. Drop a comment and let me know what city or country you're in. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that button now, because this story is going to take you on a ride you won't believe." 3 of Alfie's men had already moved. Tommy saw them in his peripheral vision, flanking him, hands on their weapons, ready to paint the walls with him if their boss gave the word. The bartender had ducked behind the counter. 2 women in the corner booth had frozen mid-laugh, their martini glasses suspended in air. Everything had stopped. Everything except Alfie Kane's steady, unblinking stare. "Put the gun down, kid." Alfie's voice was gravel and honey. Rough, but somehow smooth. The kind of voice that made you want to obey even when every instinct screamed to run. "You walk in here, interrupt my evening, point a piece at me in my own establishment." He tilted his head slightly, and Tommy saw something flicker across his face. Not anger. Curiosity. That takes either stupidity or desperation. Which is it? Tommy's jaw clenched. His arms were screaming now, muscles burning from holding the weapon extended. He could see the safety was off. He'd checked 3 times before walking through that door, 1 pull of the trigger. That's all it would take. But could he actually do it? "I said..." Tommy's voice came out stronger this time, forcing the words through the terror lodged in his throat. "You work for me now." Someone laughed. A sharp, disbelieving bark from one of the men near the pool table. The sound died instantly when Alfie raised one hand, just a subtle gesture, 2 fingers lifted from the table. Silence crashed back down. Alfie leaned forward, elbows on the table, and for the first time, Tommy saw something shift in those calculating eyes. Recognition, maybe, or something darker. Something that looked almost like understanding. "How'd you find me?" Alfie asked quietly. "Everyone knows where you are." Tommy's arms were shaking violently now. "You're not exactly hiding." "True." Alfie's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "But most people who know where I am have the good sense not to come looking, especially not 12-year-old kids with bruises on their face and blood on their sleeve." Tommy flinched. He hadn't realized the blood had soaked through his hoodie. Clive had thrown him into the glass coffee table 4 hours ago, and he'd run before bothering to clean up before the next hit came. Before. "Who hurt you?" Alfie's voice had changed. Dropped lower. Gotten colder. "Doesn't matter," Tommy whispered. "It matters to me." "Why?" The word burst out of Tommy before he could stop it, raw and desperate and so full of confusion that it hurt. "Why would you care? You don't even know me." Alfie stood. The entire bar tensed. Hands moved to weapons. Safety switches clicked in the darkness. But Alfie didn't reach for a gun. He just walked forward, slow, deliberate steps that ate up the space between them until he stood directly in front of Tommy, so close the boy could smell his cologne, see the old scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Close enough that the gun pressed directly against Alfie Kane's chest. "You're right," Alfie said softly, and Tommy felt the words more than heard them. "I don't know you, but I know that look in your eyes. I know what it takes to walk into a room full of killers and demand respect you haven't earned yet." His hand moved. Tommy tensed, finger tightening on the trigger. But Alfie didn't grab the gun. Instead, he reached out and gently, impossibly gently, placed his palm on Tommy's shoulder. "I know what it's like when nobody protects you, so you learn to protect yourself." Tommy's breath hitched. How did he? "So here's what's going to happen," Alfie continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, meant only for Tommy's ears. "You're going to tell me who hurt you. You're going to tell me why you came here. And then—" His eyes hardened into something that made Tommy's blood run cold. "I'm going to make sure they never touch you again." The gun wavered. "But first," Alfie said, and now his voice carried through the entire bar again, "you need to understand something very important." He leaned down until his face was level with Tommy's, until those dark eyes bored straight into Tommy's soul. "In this town, kid, I decide who works for who." The gun clattered to the floor. Tommy's legs gave out a second later, but he never hit the ground. Alfie caught him, one arm wrapping around the boy's thin frame, steadying him with a grip that was firm but careful, like he understood exactly how many bruises were hidden beneath that oversized hoodie. "Rico, clear the bar!" Alfie's command cut through the tension like a blade. A man built like a bull with a surprisingly gentle face stepped forward from the shadows. Rico Anderton had been Alfie's right hand for 15 years, loyal to a fault, quick with his fists, quicker with his mind. He nodded once, then gestured to the other patrons. "You heard the boss. Out. Now." The bar emptied in under a minute. Tommy heard the scrape of chairs, the rustle of jackets, the whispered curses as men who'd been hoping for entertainment found themselves ushered into the night. The two women from the corner booth lingered at the door, concern etched on their faces, until Rico shook his head, and they left too. Then it was just Tommy, Alfie, and the three men who apparently never left their boss's side. Alfie guided Tommy to the booth he'd been sitting in, easing him onto the worn leather seat. Up close, the boy looked even worse, face pale beneath the bruises, split lip still oozing, left eye swollen nearly shut. But it was the other injuries that made Alfie's jaw tighten, the finger-shaped bruises on Tommy's neck, the way he held his ribs like breathing hurt, the carefully blank expression that 12-year-old kids should never have to master. "Sophia," Alfie called without turning his head. A woman emerged from the back office, late 30s, dark hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a burgundy dress that somehow made her look both elegant and dangerous. Sophia Corleone handled Alfie's books, his legitimate businesses, and occasionally his interrogations when a softer touch was needed. She took one look at Tommy, and her expression shifted from professional to fiercely protective. "First aid kit," she said, already moving toward the supply closet. "And I'm calling Dr. Chen." "No hospitals?" Tommy rasped, panic flaring in his eyes. "They'll send me back." "Dr. Chen doesn't work at a hospital," Alfie interrupted calmly. "He works for me, and he doesn't report anything to anyone. You have my word." Tommy's fingers twisted in the fabric of his hoodie, a nervous habit that spoke of countless nights spent worrying, planning, surviving. His gaze darted around the room, cataloging exits, assessing threats, looking for the trap he was certain existed. Alfie recognized that behavior. He'd seen it in the mirror 30 years ago. "What's your name?" Alfie asked, even though he'd already heard it from the street informants who'd reported a kid asking around about him for the past 2 days. "Tommy Collins." "Tommy." Alfie tested the name, let it settle. Who's Clive Henderson? The boy's entire body went rigid. How do you... You said his name. When you were shaking. Alfie hadn't mentioned that Tommy had been muttering during those few seconds, when his legs gave out muttering apologies and names and pleading that made Alfie want to put his fist through a wall. Foster father? Tommy's silence was answer enough. Sophia returned with the first aid kit, kneeling beside the booth with the ease of someone who'd patched up wounded men more times than she cared to count. She reached for Tommy's face, movements slow and telegraphed, but he still flinched back. It's okay, sweetheart, she murmured. I just need to clean these cuts. I promise I'll be gentle. Something in her voice, maybe the warmth, maybe the way she called him sweetheart, like it wasn't a burden, made Tommy's defenses crack just slightly. He let her work, though his hands remained clenched in his lap, ready to bolt. How long? Alfie asked quietly. 3 years. Tommy's voice was barely audible. Since Mom disappeared. Disappeared? That's what the cops said. Bitterness crept into Tommy's tone, making him sound decades older than 12. One day she was there. Next day she wasn't. They searched for a month, then stopped. Said she probably ran off with some guy, left me behind like garbage. Alfie's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Rico, standing near the bar, exchanged a glance with the third member of their inner circle. Vincent Strode, their information specialist, who'd already pulled out his phone and started typing notes. And they put you with Henderson, Alfie prompted. He was nice at first. Tommy winced as Sophia dabbed antiseptic on his split lip. Said he'd take care of me, said I'd be safe, but that lasted maybe 3 weeks? Then he started drinking, started getting angry about stupid stuff. The way I chewed food, how I left dishes in the sink. Everything I did was wrong. Did you tell anyone? Sophia asked gently, though they all knew the answer. Tommy's laugh was hollow, bitter, the sound of a child who'd learned too young that adults lied. I told my social worker, Ms. Peterson. She came to check on me twice. Both times, Clive put on this perfect father act, smiled, offered her coffee, asked about her day. She ate it up. Said I was lucky to have found such a caring home. His voice dropped to a whisper. She didn't see the bruises, or she didn't want to. If you're watching this and thinking about Tommy's situation, drop a comment below about what you'd do if you met a kid like him. Would you help? Would you walk away? Let me know your thoughts. Alfie leaned back, mind already working through scenarios, possibilities, solutions. He'd built an empire on reading people, knowing their weaknesses, their desires, their breaking points. But Tommy Collins wasn't like the desperate gamblers or corrupt politicians who usually sat across from him. Tommy was something else entirely. Why me? Alfie asked finally. You could have gone to the police, could have run away to another city, could have done 100 things that didn't involve walking into a Mafia bar with a gun. Tommy met his eyes, and for the first time, Alfie saw past the fear and desperation to the steel underneath. The same steel that had carried a broken 12-year-old through 3 years of hell and brought him here, to the one place that might actually be able to help. Because the police don't care, Tommy said simply. The system doesn't care, but everyone in town says you do care, about loyalty, about people who prove themselves, about family. He swallowed hard. And I don't have a family anymore. So I thought, maybe I could earn one. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sophia's hands had stilled on Tommy's face. Rico had gone very quiet. Even Vincent had stopped typing, his phone frozen mid-message. Alfie felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd sealed shut 5 years ago when they'd lowered his son's casket into the ground, when cancer had taken the only person who'd ever called him Dad and meant it with love instead of fear. You came here to ask for protection, Alfie said slowly. No. Tommy shook his head. I came here to offer you a deal. A deal? I heard you lost people. I heard you need someone who can go places your men can't. Someone small, someone nobody notices. Tommy's voice grew stronger, more certain. I can listen, I can learn. I'm good at being invisible, and I won't betray you, not ever, because you're the first person in 3 years who's treated me like I matter. Alfie studied the boy's face, the determination mixed with terror, the hope barely clinging to life, the desperate need to be useful because useful people don't get thrown away. You don't know what you're asking for, Alfie said quietly. This life, it's not a game. It's not an adventure. People die. People suffer. And once you're in, there's no going back to normal. Normal? Tommy's voice cracked again, but this time with something like anger. I don't have normal. Normal ended when Mom vanished. He gestured to his bruised face, his battered body. This is my normal. At least with you, I'd have a choice. At least I'd matter. The silence stretched out, heavy with implications neither of them could quite name. Then Alfie made a decision that would change everything. Sophia, he said, never taking his eyes off Tommy. Set up the guest room above the club. Full security. Nobody gets in without my approval. Tommy's eyes widened. You mean? I mean you're staying here tonight. Tomorrow we're going to have a long conversation about exactly what you think you're signing up for, and then... His expression hardened into something that made even Rico take a step back. We're going to pay Clive Henderson a visit. Dr. Chen arrived 20 minutes later, a quiet man in his 60s who asked no questions and made no judgments. He examined Tommy with practiced efficiency, his gentle hands cataloging injuries that made Sophia excuse herself to the bathroom. When she returned, her eyes were red. 3 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, mild concussion, Dr. Chen reported, snapping his medical bag shut. He'll heal, but he needs rest and... He fixed Alfie with a meaningful stare. No more stress. This child's body has been in survival mode for far too long. After Dr. Chen left, Rico helped Tommy upstairs to the guest room. The boy moved like he expected the floor to disappear beneath him at any moment, like kindness was a trap he hadn't yet figured out. But exhaustion won. Within minutes of his head hitting the pillow, he was asleep. Alfie stood in the doorway, watching Tommy's chest rise and fall, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like an old, familiar coat. Boss? Vincent appeared at his elbow, phone in hand, expression grim. You're going to want to see this. They moved to Alfie's office, a soundproofed room behind the bar where the real business happened. Vincent pulled up files on his laptop, turning the screen so Alfie could see. I ran a search on Clive Henderson like you asked, Vincent began. Found his address, employment history, the usual. But then I dug deeper. He clicked through several documents. Henderson's foster license was flagged twice in the past 4 years. 2 other kids made complaints. Both times the cases were buried. Alfie's jaw clenched. By who? That's where it gets interesting. Vincent pulled up a photograph. A woman in her 50s, professionally dressed, cold smile. Sharon Peterson, senior social worker, Child Protective Services. She's the one who approved Henderson's license renewals. She's also the one who dismissed every complaint filed against him. Corruption, Alfie muttered. Gets worse. Vincent clicked again. New images appeared. Bank statements, property records, photographs of Henderson and Peterson together at a restaurant. They're connected. Peterson's been taking payments. 20 grand every time she places a kid with Henderson. And Henderson... Vincent's expression darkened. He's been receiving monthly stipends from the state for each foster child. Money meant for their care. Tommy's file shows $10,000 a year. Want to guess how much Henderson's actually spending on the kid? Alfie didn't need to guess. He'd seen Tommy's duct-taped sneakers, his threadbare clothes, the way his ribs showed through his skin like he'd been skipping meals. They're profiting off these kids, Alfie said quietly, and his voice carried the kind of cold fury that made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed, using them as cash cows. 16 children currently in Henderson's care, Vincent confirmed. All low-risk cases. Kids with no family, no advocates, nobody checking on them. Perfect victims. The office door opened. Rico stepped inside, followed by someone Alfie hadn't expected to see tonight. Detective Elena Pruitt. She was 34, sharp-featured, with auburn hair pulled back and eyes that missed nothing. Homicide detective, clean record, reputation for actually giving a damn. She'd crossed paths with Alfie twice before. Once when investigating a murder that led to his doorstep. He'd had nothing to do with it. And once when she'd asked for information on a corrupt cop, which he'd happily provided. They had an understanding. She didn't look too closely at his business. He didn't interfere with her investigations. But right now she looked anything but understanding. "We need to talk," Elena said, and there was something in her tone, urgency mixed with anger that made Alfie straighten. "Detective, this is unexpected. A 12-year-old kid walked into your bar 4 hours ago." Elena's eyes blazed. "My sources say he had a gun. They also say he's still here, and before you tell me to mind my own business, you should know." She pulled out her phone, showing him a missing persons report. "I've been investigating the disappearance of Sarah Collins for 3 years." The air left the room. Tommy's mother. "You knew her," Alfie said, not a question. "I was the responding officer when the case was first reported." Elena's expression softened slightly, memory flickering across her face. "Sarah was terrified, said her son was all she had, said she'd never abandon him. Then she vanished and everyone wrote her off as another deadbeat parent." Her voice hardened again. "But I didn't buy it. Sarah loved that kid. She wouldn't just leave." Alfie felt pieces clicking together, a puzzle he hadn't realized he was solving. "Henderson," he said. Elena nodded grimly. "Sarah filed a complaint about him 2 weeks before she disappeared. Said she had proof he was abusing children. Said she had documents, photographs, recordings I was assigned to investigate, but—" Her jaw tightened. "My captain shut it down. Said there wasn't enough evidence. Said Henderson was a pillar of the community, and 3 days later, Sarah Collins was gone." "They killed her," Alfie said flatly. "I think so. I've always thought so. But I can't prove it." Elena stepped closer, and for the first time, Alfie saw past the detective's armor to the woman underneath. Someone who'd carried this case like a stone in her heart for 3 years. "When I heard Tommy walked into your place tonight, I knew he'd figured something out. Or he was desperate enough to try what his mother couldn't finish." "He came here for protection," Alfie said. "He came here because you're the only person in this town with enough power to take on what's really happening." Elena pulled out a thick file folder, dropping it on Alfie's desk. "This is everything I've collected on Henderson, Peterson, and the foster care ring, off the record. Technically inadmissible, but it's the truth." Alfie flipped open the folder. Photographs spilled out. Bruised children, falsified records, bank transactions, property purchases, a systematic operation bleeding the system dry while destroying lives. His vision went red around the edges. "Why bring this to me?" he asked quietly. Elena met his eyes. "Because the system won't touch them. Too connected, too protected. I've tried for 3 years to build a case that'll stick, and every time it gets buried by someone higher up the chain." She leaned on the desk. "But you? You don't play by the same rules. And right now, those kids need someone who doesn't." For a long moment, Alfie studied her, looked for the trap, the angle, the hidden agenda. But all he saw was genuine fury, the kind that came from watching injustice win and being powerless to stop it. "You're asking me to go to war," he said. "I'm asking you to protect 16 children who have no one else." Elena's voice didn't waver. "Starting with the one sleeping upstairs who walked in here tonight because he'd run out of options." Alfie thought about Tommy's words. "I came here to earn a family." He thought about his son. Bright-eyed, loving, taken too soon by a disease that didn't care about money or power, or how desperately Alfie had tried to save him. He thought about the empire he'd built on fear and respect, and how none of it had mattered when it counted most. And he made a choice that would either destroy him or redeem him. "Vincent," Alfie said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Pull every file you can find on Peterson and Henderson. I want names, addresses, financial records, dirt we can actually use. Rico." He turned to his enforcer. "Gather the crew, everyone. Tell them we have a new priority." He looked at Elena. "You want me to protect those kids? Fine. But I'm not just going after Henderson and Peterson. I'm burning down the entire operation, every corrupt official, every person who looked the other way, everyone who profited from this nightmare." His eyes blazed. "And when I'm done, the system you work for won't have a choice but to pay attention." Elena's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." "One condition," Alfie added. "You work with us, share information, help us build something that'll actually stick. Because I don't just want them scared. I want them in prison, where they can't hurt anyone else." Elena extended her hand. "Deal." They shook, and in that moment, an unlikely alliance was forged. A mafia boss, a detective, and a 12-year-old boy against a system designed to crush people exactly like them. Upstairs, Tommy slept, unaware that his desperate gamble had just set in motion something far bigger than protection. He'd started a revolution. And Alfie Kane was about to remind this town exactly why you didn't cross his family, even if that family was just beginning to form. Dr. Chen arrived 20 minutes later, a quiet man in his 60s who asked no questions and made no judgments. He examined Tommy with practiced efficiency, his gentle hands cataloging injuries that made Sophia excuse herself to the bathroom. When she returned, her eyes were red. 3 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, mild concussion, Dr. Chen reported, snapping his medical bag shut. "He'll heal, but he needs rest and—" He fixed Alfie with a meaningful stare. "No more stress. This child's body has been in survival mode for far too long." After Dr. Chen left, Rico helped Tommy upstairs to the guest room. The boy moved like he expected the floor to disappear beneath him at any moment, like kindness was a trap he hadn't yet figured out, but exhaustion won. Within minutes of his head hitting the pillow, he was asleep. Alfie stood in the doorway, watching Tommy's chest rise and fall, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like an old, familiar coat. "Boss?" Vincent appeared at his elbow, phone in hand, expression grim. "You're going to want to see this." They moved to Alfie's office, a soundproofed room behind the bar where the real business happened. Vincent pulled up files on his laptop, turning the screen so Alfie could see. "I ran a search on Clive Henderson like you asked," Vincent began. "Found his address, employment history, the usual, but then I dug deeper." He clicked through several documents. Henderson's foster license was flagged twice in the past 4 years. 2 other kids made complaints. Both times the cases were buried. Alfie's jaw clenched. By who? That's where it gets interesting. Vincent pulled up a photograph. A woman in her 50s, professionally dressed, cold smile. Sharon Peterson, senior social worker, Child Protective Services. She's the one who approved Henderson's license renewals. She's also the one who dismissed every complaint filed against him. "Corruption," Alfie muttered. "Gets worse." Vincent clicked again. New images appeared. Bank statements, property records, photographs of Henderson and Peterson together at a restaurant. They're connected. Peterson's been taking payments, 20 grand every time she places a kid with Henderson. And Henderson... Vincent's expression darkened. He's been receiving monthly stipends from the state for each foster child, money meant for their care. Tommy's file shows $10,000 a year. Want to guess how much Henderson's actually spending on the kid? Alfie didn't need to guess. He'd seen Tommy's duct-taped sneakers, his threadbare clothes, the way his ribs showed through his skin like he'd been skipping meals. "They're profiting off these kids," Alfie said quietly, and his voice carried the kind of cold fury that made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed, using them as cash cows. 16 children currently in Henderson's care, Vincent confirmed. All low-risk cases. Kids with no family, no advocates, nobody checking on them, perfect victims. The office door opened. Rico stepped inside, followed by someone Alfie hadn't expected to see tonight. Detective Elena Pruitt. She was 34, sharp-featured, with auburn hair pulled back and eyes that missed nothing. Homicide detective, clean record, reputation for actually giving a damn. She'd crossed paths with Alfie twice before, once when investigating a murder that led to his doorstep. He'd had nothing to do with it. And once when she'd asked for information on a corrupt cop, which he'd happily provided. They had an understanding. She didn't look too closely at his business. He didn't interfere with her investigations. But right now, she looked anything but understanding. "We need to talk," Elena said, and there was something in her tone, urgency mixed with anger, that made Alfie straighten. "Detective, this is unexpected. A 12-year-old kid walked into your bar 4 hours ago." Elena's eyes blazed. "My sources say he had a gun. They also say he's still here. And before you tell me to mind my own business, you should know." She pulled out her phone, showing him a missing persons report. "I've been investigating the disappearance of Sarah Collins for 3 years." The air left the room. Tommy's mother. "You knew her," Alfie said. Not a question. "I was the responding officer when the case was first reported." Elena's expression softened slightly, memory flickering across her face. "Sarah was terrified, said her son was all she had, said she'd never abandon him. Then she vanished, and everyone wrote her off as another deadbeat parent." Her voice hardened again. "But I didn't buy it. Sarah loved that kid. She wouldn't just leave." Alfie felt pieces clicking together, a puzzle he hadn't realized he was solving. "Henderson," he said. Elena nodded grimly. "Sarah filed a complaint about him 2 weeks before she disappeared. Said she had proof he was abusing children. Said she had documents, photographs, recordings I was assigned to investigate, but—" Her jaw tightened. "My captain shut it down. Said there wasn't enough evidence. Said Henderson was a pillar of the community, and 3 days later, Sarah Collins was gone." "They killed her," Alfie said flatly. "I think so. I've always thought so, but I can't prove it." Elena stepped closer, and for the first time, Alfie saw past the detective's armor to the woman underneath. Someone who'd carried this case like a stone in her heart for 3 years. "When I heard Tommy walked into your place tonight, I knew he'd figured something out, or he was desperate enough to try what his mother couldn't finish." "He came here for protection," Alfie said. "He came here because you're the only person in this town with enough power to take on what's really happening." Elena pulled out a thick file folder, dropping it on Alfie's desk. "This is everything I've collected on Henderson Peterson and the foster care ring. Off the record. Technically inadmissible. But it's the truth." Alfie flipped open the folder. Photographs spilled out. Bruised children, falsified records, bank transactions, property purchases. A systematic operation bleeding the system dry while destroying lives. His vision went red around the edges. "Why bring this to me?" he asked quietly. Elena met his eyes. "Because the system won't touch them. Too connected. Too protected. I've tried for 3 years to build a case that'll stick, and every time it gets buried by someone higher up the chain." She leaned on the desk. "But you? You don't play by the same rules, and right now those kids need someone who doesn't." For a long moment, Alfie studied her, looked for the trap, the angle, the hidden agenda. But all he saw was genuine fury, the kind that came from watching injustice win and being powerless to stop it. "You're asking me to go to war," he said. "I'm asking you to protect 16 children who have no one else." Elena's voice didn't waver. "Starting with the one sleeping upstairs who walked in here tonight because he'd run out of options." Alfie thought about Tommy's words. "I came here to earn a family." He thought about his son, bright-eyed, loving, taken too soon by a disease that didn't care about money or power, or how desperately Alfie had tried to save him. He thought about the empire he'd built on fear and respect, and how none of it had mattered when it counted most. and he made a choice that would either destroy him or redeem him. "Vincent," Alfie said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Pull every file you can find on Peterson and Henderson. I want names, addresses, financial records, dirt we can actually use. Rico." He turned to his enforcer. "Gather the crew, everyone. Tell them we have a new priority." He looked at Elena. "You want me to protect those kids? Fine. But I'm not just going after Henderson and Peterson. I'm burning down the entire operation, every corrupt official, every person who looked the other way, everyone who profited from this nightmare." His eyes blazed. "And when I'm done, the system you work for won't have a choice but to pay attention." Elena's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." "One condition," Alfie added. "You work with us, share information, help us build something that'll actually stick. Because I don't just want them scared. I want them in prison, where they can't hurt anyone else." Elena extended her hand. "Deal!" They shook, and in that moment an unlikely alliance was forged. A mafia boss, a detective, and a 12-year-old boy against a system designed to crush people exactly like them. Upstairs, Tommy slept, unaware that his desperate gamble had just set in motion something far bigger than protection. He'd started a revolution, and Alfie Kane was about to remind this town exactly why you didn't cross his family, even if that family was just beginning to form. The plan was simple. Surveillance first, confrontation second. But plans changed when Rico's phone buzzed at 11 p.m. with a message from one of his street contacts. "Henderson's moving. Loading van. Looks like he's running." Alfie didn't hesitate. "Everyone moves now?" They split into two teams. Rico and Vincent would tail Henderson. Alfie and Elena would go after Peterson. Tommy stayed at the bar with Sophia and Dr. Foster, protected by 3 of Alfie's most trusted men. The boy had protested, loudly, until Alfie knelt in front of him and spoke words that would stay with Tommy forever. "You've been brave enough. Let us handle this part. Your job now is to heal." 30 minutes later, Alfie and Elena sat in her unmarked car outside Peterson's suburban home. Lights blazed in every window. Through the curtains, they could see shadows moving frantically. "She knows," Elena muttered, hand on her weapon. "Someone tipped her off." "Then we don't wait." Alfie reached for the door handle. Elena grabbed his arm. "If we go in there without a warrant, without backup..." "You're a detective investigating a missing persons case who just received credible evidence that a suspect is destroying materials. That's exigent circumstances." Alfie's eyes met hers. "We both know how this works, Elena. The question is whether you're willing to cross the line." For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then she thought about Sarah Collins, about Tommy's bruised face, about 16 children failed by every system meant to protect them. "Let's go." They approached the house together, Elena in front with her badge ready, Alfie close behind. The front door was unlocked, never a good sign. Inside, the house looked like a tornado had hit it. Papers everywhere, filing cabinets emptied, a shredder running in the corner, overheated and smoking. They found Peterson in her home office, frantically feeding documents into a fireplace. "Sharon Peterson," Elena announced, weapon drawn. "Step away from the fireplace, now." Peterson spun, and the look on her face wasn't fear. It was calculation. Cold. Reptilian. "Detective Pruitt, how predictable." She smiled, and it was the most unsettling thing Tommy had ever seen. "You have no warrant, no legal authority to be here. Whatever you think you found means nothing." "We have Sarah Collins' files," Alfie said quietly. "Everything she documented, every crime, every victim." Peterson's smile widened. "You have copies of files that don't prove anything without context. Files that could have been fabricated. Files that..." She pulled something from her pocket. A phone. Already dialed. "Will disappear along with everyone stupid enough to threaten my operation." Elena's blood went cold. "Who did you call?" "Someone who understands that certain problems require permanent solutions." The implication hit like a freight train. Alfie's face went white. "Tommy!" They ran. Elena drove like the devil was chasing them. Maybe he was. Alfie had his phone out, calling Rico, calling the bar, calling everyone. No one answered. Come on," he muttered, redialing Sophia's number for the 4th time. Finally, she picked up. "Boss, we've got a situation." Gunfire crackled through the phone. Alfie's world narrowed to a single point of absolute clarity. "Get Tommy to the safe room. Now." "Already there, but boss, they came prepared. 4 men, heavy weapons. We can hold them for maybe 10 minutes. The line went dead. Elena pressed the accelerator to the floor. "We're 5 minutes out." "That's 5 minutes too long." They didn't speak for the rest of the drive. Didn't need to. Both of them were thinking the same thing. If Tommy died because they'd gotten him involved in this, there would be no coming back from that. The Crimson Anchor was under siege when they arrived. 2 bodies on the ground outside. Peterson's hired guns taken down by Alfie's security, but more were inside. Elena could hear the firefight from the street. "Back entrance," Alfie said, already moving. They went in fast and low, weapons ready. The bar was a war zone. Overturned tables, shattered glass, bullet holes in the walls. 2 more of Peterson's men lay unconscious. One of Alfie's guards was down, bleeding but alive. The sound of gunfire came from above. The guest room. Alfie took the stairs 3 at a time, Elena right behind him. The hallway was a kill box, narrow, no cover, perfect for an ambush. But they didn't have a choice. The door to Tommy's room hung off its hinges. Inside, they found carnage. Sophia stood in front of the safe room door, blood streaming from a shoulder wound, gun in her shaking hand. 2 more bodies on the floor and advancing toward her, weapon raised. Alfie didn't think, just moved. Tackled the gunman from behind, sending them both crashing into the wall. The gun went flying. They grappled, vicious and close, until Elena ended it with a precise strike to the attacker's temple. Silence fell, broken only by labored breathing. "Tommy!" Alfie gasped, scrambling to the safe room. "Tommy!" The reinforced door opened. Tommy stood there, pale and shaking, but alive. Behind him, Dr. Foster held a gun. Apparently, the child psychologist had hidden talents. Tommy threw himself at Alfie, arms wrapping around the Mafia boss's waist, and started sobbing. Great, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. Alfie held him. Just held him. Let the boy cry 3 years of pain into his chest. "I've got you," Alfie whispered. "I've got you, kid. You're safe." Over Tommy's head, his eyes met Elena's. She was watching them with an expression that made his breath catch. Something raw and vulnerable and real. "We need to end this," she said quietly. "Tonight. Before they send more." Alfie nodded, still holding Tommy. "Rico just texted. They have Henderson. He's talking, trying to make a deal." "And Peterson?" "Heading to a private airstrip outside town, trying to run." Alfie's expression hardened. "Vincent's tracking her. She won't make it." Elena should have objected, should have insisted on procedure and protocol. Instead, she holstered her weapon and moved closer to Alfie and Tommy, close enough to place a hand on Tommy's back, close enough that the 3 of them formed something that looked almost like a family. "Then let's finish it," she said. "Together." And in that moment, with gunpowder in the air and blood on the floor, an alliance became something more. Something worth fighting for. Something worth dying for. The call came at 3 a.m., 3 hours after Peterson was arrested trying to board a private jet. Alfie answered on the first ring, chest tight with dread. Nothing good ever came from calls at this hour. "Mr. Kane." The voice was smooth, professional, utterly cold. "My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm the city attorney. I'm calling to inform you that Tommy Collins is being removed from your care effective immediately." Alfie sat up, ice flooding his veins. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you are an unfit guardian, a known criminal, a danger to the child." Whitmore's tone never wavered. "Child Protective Services will be arriving at your location within the hour to collect him. If you interfere, you will be arrested for kidnapping." "You can't do this." "I can and I am. Peterson and Henderson may have fallen, but the system they worked within still exists, and that system doesn't leave children with Mafia bosses, no matter how well-intentioned." A pause. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The line went dead. Alfie stared at his phone, mind racing. Beside him, Elena sat up, reading his expression. "What happened?" "They're taking Tommy." His voice was hollow. "In an hour." Elena was already reaching for her phone. "I'll call my captain. Get an emergency injunction." "Your captain is the one who shut down Sarah Collins' case 3 years ago," Alfie said quietly. "You think he's going to help us now?" The truth of it settled over them like ash. Tommy appeared in the doorway, wearing borrowed pajamas that were still too big. He'd been staying in the room next to Alfie's since the attack, too afraid to be alone. Now his face was pale, understanding dawning. "They're sending me back," he whispered. "Not back to Henderson," Alfie said quickly. "He's in custody, but to another foster home, another stranger who'll pretend to care until they don't." Tommy's voice cracked. "You promised. You said you'd protect me." The words hit like bullets. "I'm trying, kid. I swear I'm—" "You're trying!" Tommy's pain transformed into anger, the kind that came from being disappointed by adults one too many times. "You're Alfie Kane. Everyone says you run this city, but you can't stop them from taking me?" His hands clenched into fists. "Maybe everyone's wrong. Maybe you're not as powerful as you think." He turned and ran back to his room, slamming the door. Alfie stood to follow, but Elena caught his arm. "Give him a minute," she said softly. "He's scared. He doesn't mean it." "He's right, though." Alfie sank back onto the bed, head in his hands. "I built an empire on fear and control, but when it actually matters, when a kid needs protection from his own government, I can't do a damn thing." Elena sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "This isn't over. We still have the evidence. We can fight this." "How?" "They'll bury Tommy in the system before we can get a court date. Move him 3 states away. Give him a new identity. We'll never find him." His voice broke. "Just like they did with his mother." "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true." Alfie looked at her, and Elena saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes. Absolute despair. "I thought I could save him. Thought I could make up for all the people I've hurt, all the mistakes I've made. But I'm just a criminal playing pretend at being a hero. That's not true." Elena grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "You gave that boy hope. You showed him that someone cares. That matters, Alfie. Even if they take him, that matters." "Does it? If he ends up dead in a ditch like his mother, what does hope matter?" Elena kissed him. She didn't plan it, didn't think about it. Just leaned forward and pressed her lips to his because words weren't enough, and he needed to understand that he wasn't alone in this fight. Alfie froze for half a heartbeat, then kissed her back, desperate and fierce and full of everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena spoke first. "You don't get to give up," she said fiercely. "Not on Tommy, not on this, and not on whatever this is between us." Her eyes blazed. "I've spent 3 years following the rules, trying to do things the right way, and it got me nowhere. You spent 1 week breaking every rule in the book and gave those kids more hope than the system ever did. So don't you dare tell me you're just a criminal." Before Alfie could respond, Rico burst through the door. "Boss, we've got a problem. Henderson's dead." The world tilted. "What?" "Suicide, they're calling it. Found hanged in his cell an hour ago." Rico's expression was grim. But the guards on duty both called in sick at the same time the cameras malfunctioned, and Henderson was left-handed but the knot was tied by someone right-handed. They killed him, Elena breathed, before he could testify. Gets worse. Rico handed Alfie his phone. Peterson's lawyer just posted bail. Judge approved it 30 minutes ago. Despite the mountain of evidence, she walked out of jail 20 minutes ago and disappeared. Alfie's mind raced. The USB drive? Vincent has it locked down, Rico assured him. Multiple copies, multiple locations. But without Henderson's testimony, without Peterson in custody. He didn't need to finish. The case was falling apart. They're cleaning house, Alfie said quietly. Tying up loose ends, which means… Tommy's a loose end, Elena finished, horror dawning. They're not taking him to protect him. They're taking him to silence him. The three of them stared at each other as the implications sank in. Outside, the first hints of dawn painted the sky. In 1 hour, CPS would arrive. And if they took Tommy, he'd vanish into a system designed to make inconvenient children disappear. Alfie stood, something hardening in his expression. A decision made. A line crossed. Rico, get the car ready. Full tank, cash, fake plates. Boss? I'm not letting them take him. Elena grabbed his arm. Alfie, if you run, you'll be a fugitive. They'll hunt you. Everything you've built here will be gone. Then it's gone. He looked at her, and his eyes held no doubt. I've built a lot of things in my life, Elena, most of them on blood and fear. But that kid upstairs? He's the first good thing I've done in 20 years, and I'm not giving him up. Not to them, not to anyone. You'll lose everything. I already lost what mattered most when my son died. His voice was raw, honest. Maybe this is my chance to save something. Someone. Elena stood there, torn between duty and desire, between the law she'd sworn to uphold and the justice that law had failed to deliver. Then she made her choice. I'm coming with you. Elena. You think I'm letting you take a traumatized 12-year-old on the run by yourself? You need someone who knows how the system works, how they'll track you, how to stay ahead. She squeezed his hand. And you need someone who cares about both of you enough to make sure you don't do something stupid. Alfie pulled her close, forehead against hers. You'll lose your badge, your career, everything. Some things matter more than a badge. If you're still watching, drop a comment. Would you risk everything to protect a child? Would you become a fugitive to do what's right? Let me know, and don't forget to subscribe for the rest of this incredible story. They had 53 minutes before CPS arrived. 53 minutes to disappear. And behind them, somewhere in the darkness, Peterson was already moving, erasing evidence, buying silence, ensuring that the system she'd built would survive, even if it meant killing everyone who threatened it. Tommy stood in the doorway of his room, a small backpack slung over his shoulder. His eyes were red from crying, but his jaw was set with determination that made him look far older than 12. I heard everything, he said quietly. You're going to run. Take me somewhere they can't find us. Alfie nodded, throat tight. We leave in 40 minutes. No. The single word stopped everyone cold. Tommy, Elena began. No, Tommy repeated, stronger this time. He stepped into the room, and despite his small frame and bruised face, he commanded attention. Running doesn't solve anything, it just means Peterson wins. It means every other kid still trapped in the system stays trapped. It means my mom died for nothing. Kid, if we stay, they take you, Alfie said gently. And once you're in their custody, then we make sure they can't take me. Tommy's eyes blazed with an intensity that reminded Alfie painfully of Sarah Collins. You said my mom had evidence. You said she was going to the FBI. Why didn't it work? She never made it there, Elena said. They killed her first. But what if she did make it? Tommy moved to Vincent's laptop, still open on the table with Sarah's files displayed. What if she sent them something before she disappeared? What if there's proof they ignored it? Vincent straightened, fingers already flying over the keyboard. You think she contacted the FBI? Mom was smart, really smart. Tommy's voice wavered but held. She wouldn't have kept all her evidence in one place. She told me once, the day before she disappeared, she said, "If anything happens to me, the truth is already out there. Someone just has to look for it." Federal databases, Vincent muttered, hacking through security protocols with practiced ease. If she filed a formal complaint, there'd be a record. The room fell silent, except for keyboard clicks. 38 minutes until CPS arrived. Then Vincent's screen flashed. "Oh my God," everyone crowded around. Sarah Collins filed a federal complaint with the FBI's Public Corruption Division on March 14th, 3 years ago, the day before she disappeared. She uploaded 43 pages of evidence, including photographs, financial records, and witness statements. Vincent's voice shook. The complaint was assigned to Special Agent Marcus. "Don't use that name," Alfie interrupted automatically, remembering Tommy's instructions. Vincent blinked. "Right. Sorry. Special Agent William Morrison, who marked it as insufficient evidence and closed the case within 48 hours. He clicked through files, but here's the thing. Morrison was transferred 2 months later, promoted, to where? Another click. To head the FBI's regional office, the same office that would have jurisdiction over Peterson's operation. "He's dirty," Rico breathed. "She bought an FBI agent." "Not just bought him." Elena leaned closer, mind racing. "She got him promoted so he'd have the power to bury any investigation. That's why my case got shut down, why Henderson's license kept getting renewed, why nothing we did mattered." Her expression hardened. "Morrison's been protecting the entire operation from federal oversight." "So what do we do?" Sophia asked. "If the FBI is compromised—" "Not all of it." Vincent was still typing, pulling up personnel files. "Morrison's supervisor is Deputy Director Catherine Zhang. Her record is spotless, 26 years, not a single complaint, built her career on taking down corruption." He looked up. "If we go over Morrison's head, directly to Zhang with everything, the original complaint, proof it was buried, the new evidence—" "She'd have to investigate," Elena finished. "Federal investigation trumps local CPS. They couldn't take Tommy during an active federal case." 35 minutes, Rico warned. Alfie looked at Tommy, seeing the hope kindling in the boy's eyes. The desperate need to believe they could win this without running, without hiding. "It's risky," Alfie said quietly. "If Zhang is compromised too, or if Morrison gets wind of it first, then we'll have tried everything." Tommy stepped closer to Alfie, placed a small hand on the Mafia boss's arm. "You told me you built your empire on being smart, on reading people, on knowing who to trust." His voice cracked. "Do you trust that this can work?" Alfie looked at the boy, really looked at him. Saw the courage it took to stand here and fight instead of run. Saw Sarah Collins's determination living on in her son, saw everything he'd once hoped his own son might have become. "Yeah, kid," he said softly. "I trust it." "Then we need to move fast." Elena was already on her phone. "Zhang's based in D.C., but she's attending a law enforcement conference in Chicago this weekend. 4 hours from here, if we can get to her in person, show her everything before Morrison knows we're coming." "We'd need a plane," Vincent said. "Commercial flights are too easy to track." "I have a plane." Sophia spoke up, and everyone turned to stare. She shrugged. "What? You think I just manage the bar? I've got investments including a small charter service. We can be airborne in 20 minutes. CPS will be here in 33, Rico pointed out. "So we leave now," Tommy said firmly. "All of us. We go to Chicago, we give Zhang everything, and we force the FBI to do their job." He looked around the room, at Alfie, Elena, Rico, Vincent, Sophia, Dr. Foster, who'd been quietly witnessing everything together. "Together," Alfie echoed, and made his decision. Not to run, Not to hide, but to fight. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Judge Patricia Martinez, please. Tell her Alfie Kane needs an emergency favor. Yes, I know what time it is. She'll take the call. Elena raised an eyebrow. You have a judge in your pocket? I have a judge whose daughter I saved from an abusive husband 3 years ago. She owes me. Alfie waited as the call connected. Patricia, I need an emergency protective order temporary custody granted to me for Tommy Collins, effective immediately. Pending federal investigation? Yes, federal, FBI. I'm sending you documentation now. He nodded to Vincent, who started transmitting files. I know it's irregular, Alfie continued, but that boy's life depends on this order holding for the next 12 hours. Can you do it? Thank you. He ended the call. We have a legal shield. Temporary, but it'll stop CPS long enough for us to get to Zhang. That's actually brilliant, Elena admitted. Morally questionable, legally dubious, but brilliant. I have my moments. Alfie grabbed his jacket. Everyone pack light. We move in 10. Tommy threw his arms around Alfie's waist, hugging him tight. Thank you, he whispered, for not giving up, for believing we can win. Alfie hugged him back, and over the boy's head, his eyes met Elena's. She smiled, real and warm and full of something that looked a lot like love. We're going to end this, she said. All of it. Peterson, Morrison, the whole corrupt system. Together, Alfie repeated, and this time it felt like a promise, like a vow, like the beginning of something that could actually save them all. 23 minutes later, they were airborne. Below them, 3 CPS agents arrived at the Crimson Anchor with court orders and police backup. They found the bar empty, except for a posted notice, emergency protective custody order signed by Judge Martinez Legal. Binding. Untouchable. For now. In Chicago, Deputy Director Catherine Zhang was reviewing notes for her conference speech, unaware that in 4 hours, her world would be turned upside down by a mafia boss, a rogue detective, and a 12-year-old boy carrying proof of the biggest corruption scandal the FBI had seen in decades. And somewhere in the darkness, Peterson made her own plans, calling in favors, eliminating witnesses, preparing for one final move that would either save her empire or destroy everyone who threatened it. The endgame had begun. Deputy Director Catherine Zhang's hotel suite overlooked downtown Chicago, morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. She was a woman who'd built her career on instinct, knowing when to push, when to wait, when to strike. And right now, every instinct screamed that the knock on her door at 7 a.m. would change everything. She opened it to find an unlikely group, a known mafia boss, a detective she recognized from case files, a 12-year-old boy with haunted eyes, and 3 others who radiated the kind of loyalty that couldn't be bought. Deputy Director Zhang, Alfie began, we have evidence of federal corruption, and we need you to see it before someone tries to kill us for it. Zhang studied them for exactly 3 seconds. Then she stepped aside. Come in. For the next hour, they laid it all out. Vincent connected his laptop to Zhang's TV, displaying every file, every photograph, every piece of evidence Sarah Collins had gathered 3 years ago. Elena presented the case from a law enforcement perspective. Dr. Foster provided psychological profiles of the children affected. And Tommy, brave, brilliant Tommy, told his story with a clarity that left no room for doubt. When they finished, Zhang sat in silence, her expression unreadable. Special Agent Morrison, she finally said, you're alleging that one of my senior agents buried a federal complaint and has been protecting a child trafficking operation for 3 years. We're not alleging, Alfie corrected quietly. We're proving it. Zhang stood, moved to the window, thinking. If what you're showing me is true, and I believe it is, then this goes beyond Morrison. Sharon Peterson couldn't have operated this long without protection at multiple levels: state, local, federal. She turned to face them. You're asking me to dismantle an entire network. We're asking you to do your job, Tommy said, and there was no disrespect in his voice. Just truth. My mom tried. She died for it. I'm not going to let that be for nothing. Something shifted in Zhang's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of courage when she saw it. Your mother was Sarah Collins, Zhang said softly. It wasn't a question. I remember that complaint. I reviewed it personally after Morrison closed it. Something felt wrong, but by then she'd disappeared, and there was no way to follow up without evidence. You tried to investigate? Elena asked, surprised. I tried. Morrison blocked me at every turn, said I was overreaching, that the case was closed. Zhang's jaw tightened. I didn't have enough to challenge him then, but now… She looked at the screen, at the mountain of evidence. Now I do. Her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and her expression hardened. Morrison, he knows you're here. How? Rico demanded. Because I'm not the only one they were watching. Zhang answered the call on speaker. Special Agent Morrison. Catherine. Morrison's voice was smooth, controlled. Too controlled. I understand you have some visitors. I need you to detain them immediately. They're fugitives, kidnapping, interference with a federal investigation. Interesting, Zhang interrupted. Because I'm looking at a federal complaint filed 3 years ago that you closed without proper investigation. Care to explain why? Silence. Then, I don't know what they've told you, but they've shown me everything, William. Financial records, witness statements, proof that you've been protecting a corruption network. Her voice went cold. You have 2 options. Turn yourself in, or run and make this worse. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Morrison said, and now his control was cracking. This goes higher than you think. People with real power, if you pursue this, it'll destroy your career. Then I'll rebuild it, knowing I did the right thing. Zhang ended the call. The room erupted into motion. Zhang made calls to FBI tactical teams, to federal prosecutors, to every agency with jurisdiction. Within minutes, arrest warrants were being issued. Federal agents were mobilizing. Morrison will run, Elena predicted, or try to destroy evidence. He'll go after Peterson first, Alfie said. She's the loose end that can tie him to everything. Zhang nodded. I've got teams moving to her last known location, but… Tommy's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meet me where your mother disappeared. 1 hour. Come alone, or more people die. SP. It's a trap, Rico said immediately. Of course it's a trap, Alfie agreed, which is why we're walking into it with federal backup. No. Tommy looked up, face pale but determined. She said alone. If she sees a team, she'll run or kill whoever she's holding hostage. You think she has hostages? Elena asked. Why else specify more people die? Tommy's voice shook. She's going to try to trade them for her freedom, and if we don't show up exactly how she wants, she'll kill them. Zhang pulled up a map. Where your mother disappeared, that's the Riverside Warehouse District. Abandoned buildings, no surveillance. She looked at Alfie. This is your city. What's there? Old processing plants, easy to hide in, easier to die in. Alfie was already planning. But she's right about one thing. If we flood the zone, people die. So we give her what she wants, Elena said slowly. Tommy shows up alone, but he's not actually alone. She outlined a plan that was risky, dangerous, and possibly brilliant. 45 minutes later, Tommy walked into the warehouse district alone. Or so it appeared. Alfie and Elena were positioned on a nearby rooftop with Rico, watching through high-powered scopes. Zhang's tactical team surrounded the perimeter, far enough back to be invisible, close enough to move fast, and Tommy wore a wire so small Peterson would never find it. The boy walked through shadows and rubble until he found Peterson standing in the center of an old processing plant. She wasn't alone. Ms. Whitmore, the city attorney, stood beside her. So did 2 people Tommy didn't recognize, a state senator and someone who looked like federal law enforcement. But it was the fourth person that made Tommy's heart stop. Morrison. Gun drawn, pointed at a woman bound to a chair, hood over her head. "Tommy Collins," Peterson smiled, and it was the smile of a snake. "So brave, so stupid." She gestured to the hooded woman. "I believe you've been looking for her." Peterson ripped off the hood. Tommy's world exploded. His mother, Sarah Collins. Older, thinner, terrified, but alive. "Mom?" The word tore out of him. "Tommy!" Sarah's voice broke. "Baby, I'm so sorry, I'm so—" Morrison pressed the gun to her head. "Touching reunion. Here's how this works. You give us the USB drive, all copies, and your mother lives." "You said she was dead," Tommy whispered, eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "Everyone said—" "We kept her alive as insurance," Peterson said calmly, "in case the evidence ever surfaced. Turns out that was wise." On the rooftop, Alfie's hands clenched into fists. "We need to move, now." "Not yet," Zhang said, listening to the wire. "Let them talk. They're confessing." Tommy's mind raced. His mother was alive. Alive. 3 years of grief, and she'd been alive the whole time. "Why?" he asked. "Why keep her alive?" "Because dead martyrs inspire investigations," Morrison answered. "Living hostages ensure silence. We told Sarah if she ever tried to contact you, we'd kill you both. She's been very cooperative." "You bastards!" Sarah spat. "You stole 3 years of my son's life." Morrison struck her with the gun. Sarah's head snapped to the side, blood trickling from her lip. Tommy screamed and lunged forward. Rico caught him on the wire, held him back from his rage. "The drive," Peterson repeated. "Now, or she dies for real this time." Tommy's hand went to his pocket, pulled out a USB drive, one of Vincent's copies. "Let her go first." "No." "Then shoot me too," Tommy said, and his voice was steel. "Because I'm not giving you anything until my mom is safe." Hey viewers, drop a comment right now. What would you do in Tommy's position? Would you trade everything to save someone you love? Morrison's finger tightened on the trigger. "You're bluffing." "I'm 12 years old. I walked into a Mafia bar with a gun. I survived 3 years with a man who beat me daily. I exposed your entire operation." Tommy met Morrison's eyes without flinching. "Do I look like I bluff?" For a long moment, no one moved. Then Zhang's voice came through everyone's earpieces. "All units, go now." FBI tactical teams poured in from every direction. Morrison spun, fired wildly. Peterson ran for the back exit and found herself face to face with Alfie Kane, who'd scaled down from the roof with Rico while everyone was focused on Tommy. "Going somewhere?" Alfie asked pleasantly, then drove his fist into her face. Elena reached Sarah, cutting her bonds while federal agents swarmed Morrison. He fought, got off 3 more shots before they took him down. 1 shot went wide, 1 hit a support beam, the 3rd was aimed at Tommy. Sarah screamed. Tommy froze. And Alfie, who'd turned at the sound, moved faster than anyone thought possible. He hit Tommy like a linebacker, driving them both to the ground as the bullet screamed past where the boy's head had been a split second before. They landed hard. Alfie's body curved around Tommy's, protecting him even after the danger passed. "You okay?" Alfie gasped. Tommy was crying and laughing at the same time. "You saved me. You actually—" "Of course I did." Alfie pulled him up, and Tommy threw his arms around his neck. "You're mine, kid. Nobody hurts what's mine." Sarah stumbled toward them, Elena supporting her weight. Mother and son locked eyes across 10 feet of warehouse floor. 3 years of separation, 3 years of pain, 3 years of believing the other was lost forever. Then Sarah was running, and Tommy was running, and they collided in a hug that felt like coming home. They sobbed. Both of them. Great, wrenching sounds of relief and joy and grief all mixed together. "I thought you were dead," Tommy kept saying. "I thought I'd never—" I'm here, baby. I'm here. I've got you. I'm never letting go again. Alfie stepped back, giving them space, and found Elena beside him. She took his hand, squeezed hard. You did it, she whispered. You saved them both. We did it, he corrected. All of us. Around them, federal agents cuffed Morrison, Peterson, Whitmore, and the others. Zhang moved through the scene like an avenging angel, ensuring everything was documented, every confession recorded. The empire built on broken children was falling. And in the center of it all, a mother held her son and promised him that the nightmare was finally over. 6 months later, the community center opened on a Tuesday morning in October, sunlight streaming through new windows and catching on the freshly painted sign, Sarah's Haven, a safe place for every child. Tommy stood beside his mother, watching as people filed in for the grand opening. Reporters, social workers, families, and 16 children who'd once been trapped in the same nightmare he'd survived. Now thriving, healing, finding their way back to hope. You ready for this? Sarah asked, squeezing his hand. Tommy smiled. A real smile, the kind that had taken months of therapy with Dr. Foster to rediscover. Yeah, Mom, I'm ready. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. Morrison's arrest had triggered a domino effect. Federal investigations, congressional hearings, system-wide reforms. 23 people were indicted on charges ranging from fraud to child endangerment to conspiracy to commit murder. Peterson and Morrison both faced life sentences. The foster care corruption ring had been completely dismantled. But more importantly, children were being protected. New oversight committees, mandatory home inspections, independent advocates for every foster child. Changes that should have existed all along, but finally did, because one 12-year-old boy had been brave enough to walk into a Mafia bar with a gun. Sarah had testified at every trial, her 3 years of captivity documented in heartbreaking detail. She'd been held in a basement outside the city, drugged just enough to keep her compliant, told repeatedly that Tommy was dead to break her spirit. But she'd never stopped fighting, never stopped believing she'd find her way back to her son. Now she was here, whole, healing, and determined to make sure no other mother lost her child to corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah spoke into the microphone, her voice steady and strong. Thank you all for coming. This center exists because of one simple truth. Every child deserves to be protected, to be heard, to be loved. She looked at Tommy. My son taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to fight even when you're terrified. He saved 16 children by refusing to stay silent. And today, we honor that courage by creating a space where children will always have a voice. Applause erupted. Tommy felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment and pride. After the speeches, after the ribbon cutting, after the tours and interviews and handshakes, Tommy found himself in the back garden where Alfie stood alone, watching the sunset. You came, Tommy said, surprised. He knew Alfie had been avoiding the spotlight. A Mafia boss didn't exactly fit the narrative of heroes and redemption that the media preferred. Wouldn't miss it, kid. Alfie turned, and Tommy saw something different in his face. Lighter, like a weight had finally lifted. Your mom did something incredible here. We all did. Tommy moved to stand beside him. You especially. I don't know about that. I do. Tommy's voice was firm. You gave me a place to belong when I had nothing. You risked everything, your business, your freedom, your life, to protect me. That's not criminal behavior. That's family. Alfie's throat tightened. Over the past 6 months, he'd been quietly transitioning his operations, shutting down illegal enterprises, investing in legitimate businesses, using his influence for actual good instead of profit. It wasn't redemption, exactly. The past couldn't be erased. But maybe it could be balanced by a better future. How's school? Alfie asked, changing the subject before he got too emotional. Good, hard, but good. Tommy grinned. Turns out 3 years of survival instincts translate pretty well to 8th grade politics. And the nightmares? Less frequent. Dr. Foster says that's progress. Tommy paused. What about you? How are things with Elena? Right on cue, Detective Elena Pruitt, now Special Consultant Elena Pruitt, after taking a leave from the police force, emerged from the center with Sarah. The two women were laughing about something, and when Elena's eyes found Alfie, her whole face lit up. Things are good, Alfie admitted, unable to stop his own smile. Really good. Elena had been his anchor through everything. The investigations, the media circus, the slow process of becoming someone better. They'd moved in together 3 months ago, her daughter from a previous marriage warming up to him with surprising speed. Turned out, reformed criminals made pretty decent father figures when they actually tried. You're going to marry her, aren't you? Tommy asked knowingly. Thinking about it. Alfie ruffled Tommy's hair. What do you think? Should I? Absolutely. But... Tommy's expression turned serious. You better not do it without inviting me. I walked into a bar with a gun for you. I deserve to be best man. Alfie laughed. A real, genuine laugh that felt like freedom. Deal. Inside the center, Rico was teaching self-defense to a group of kids, his gentle giant persona making them feel safe while learning to be strong. Vincent had donated his entire tech setup and was running coding classes. Sophia managed the center's finances, ensuring every dollar went exactly where it should. Even Judge Martinez had joined the board, using her legal expertise to help families navigate the system. The entire family Alfie had built, some by blood, most by choice, had come together to create something beautiful from the ashes of corruption. Tommy! One of the younger kids called from inside. Come play basketball with us! Go on, Alfie encouraged. I'll be here when you're done. Tommy started to leave, then turned back. Hey, Alfie? Yeah, kid? Thank you. For everything. For seeing me when everyone else looked away. For choosing to be the person who saved me instead of the person who ignored me. His voice cracked slightly. You gave me my life back. You gave me my mom back. I'll never forget that. Alfie pulled him into a hug. The kind of hug that said, you're mine, you're safe, you're loved without needing words. You saved yourself, Tommy. You walked into that bar. You demanded protection. You refused to give up. Alfie held him at arm's length, meeting his eyes. I just gave you the tools. You did the rest. We did it together, Tommy said firmly. Family does things together. Yeah, Alfie agreed, the word settling into his chest like a homecoming. Family does. Tommy ran off to join the basketball game, his laughter mixing with the other children's, a sound that had been absent from his life for far too long. Elena slipped her hand into Alfie's, watching Tommy play with a smile that held everything they'd fought for. He's going to be okay, she said softly. Better than okay. That kid's going to change the world. Alfie turned to face her. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure he has the chance to do it. The rest of your life, huh? Elena's eyes sparkled with mischief. That's a pretty long commitment. I'm good with commitment. Alfie reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. In fact, I was thinking about making another one. Elena's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. I know I'm not perfect, Alfie said, voice rough with emotion. I've done things I'm not proud of, hurt people, made mistakes, but you make me want to be better. You and Tommy and all these kids, you make me believe redemption is actually possible. He took her hand. Elena Pruitt, will you marry a reformed criminal who's desperately in love with you? Tears streamed down Elena's face. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed while inside the center, Tommy happened to glance out the window. He saw them together and pumped his fist in victory, making his basketball teammates laugh. Before you go, I want to hear from you. What did you think of Tommy's journey? What moment touched your heart the most? Drop a comment below, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Stories like this need to be shared, and your support means everything. 3 years later. Tommy Collins stood at his high school graduation, valedictorian medal around his neck, looking out at the crowd. His mother sat in the front row, tears of pride streaming down her face. Beside her, Alfie and Elena, married now, with a baby daughter named Hope, cheered louder than anyone. When I was 12, Tommy began his speech, I thought my life was over. I'd lost my mother. I'd lost hope. I'd lost any reason to believe adults could be trusted. He paused, letting the words sink in. Then I met someone who taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who fights for you, who refuses to let you fall. He locked eyes with Alfie, who nodded with pride so fierce it was almost tangible. This diploma isn't just mine, Tommy continued. It belongs to every person who believed I deserved a future. It belongs to the 16 kids who survived with me and are thriving now. It belongs to my mom, who never gave up even when they tried to break her. And it belongs to a man who proved that it's never too late to choose redemption. The audience erupted in applause. After the ceremony, as families celebrated on the lawn, Tommy found himself surrounded by his people. Rico teaching his daughter a gentle headlock, Vincent showing younger kids coding tricks, Sophia organizing the after-party with military precision, Dr. Foster discussing college applications, Judge Martinez offering legal advice for Tommy's future law school aspirations. And at the center of it all, Sarah and Alfie, two people who'd saved each other by saving a 12-year-old boy who'd walked into a bar with a gun and changed everyone's lives. So, Sarah said, hugging Tommy tight. Ready for the next chapter? Tommy looked around at his family, chosen, earned, fought for, looked at the life he'd built from the ashes of trauma, looked at the future stretching ahead, bright and full of possibility. Yeah, Mom, he said, smiling that genuine smile that came so easily now. I'm ready. Because sometimes the darkest moments led to the brightest futures. Sometimes courage was found in the most unlikely places. And sometimes redemption was as simple as one broken person choosing to save another. The town had been shocked, the corrupt system dismantled, the children protected. But more than that, a boy found his mother, a criminal found his purpose, a detective found her partner, and 16 children found their voices. They'd all found hope. And in the end, hope was what mattered most. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for courage, redemption, and hope. Drop a comment telling me what you thought. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is be the person who answers.